So we are going to build the axle for the Automoblox in 5.5 CAD model features work packet. So the axle appears on page 4 and looking at that axle we can see that it is a revolved thing, it is symmetrical, so we are just going to draw the top half. So in order to do that, we're going to make sure our project folder is set to Automoblox. Mine is. It's check mark. So we're done. We can go and create a new standard part. Create. As we start off every new thing, we are going to create a new sketch. That sketch is going to be created on my XY axis. I see it's a symmetrical thing. I see it's rotated. I see lots of diameter dimensions, so I'm going to start with a center line. This is a construction center line that I'm going to make extra long. Our part is only 0.88 long, but I am going to stretch this center line on the x-axis over 2 inches. I'm going to hit escape to stop drawing a center line. I'm going to come up to my format panel and I'm going to turn off center lines, that from now on I can draw just regular lines. Now I'm going to draw the top half of my axle. Now I'm going to leave out all the internal stuff because later I'm going to create all that with counterbores. So I'm just going to do the top of the external of this part. So I'm going to do that with lines. So I'm going to select lines. I'm going to come down to the center line, come inside it a little bit, start my line. I'm going to extend it, and here's a good spot to actually put the dimension in. 0.88 is the width of this part. I might as well put it in here. That way I can just be sure that I am drawing whatever my Automoblox axle to scale with what is on the paper. Because from here I'm not going to put dimensions on, I'm just going to make the approximate shape. So without the internal stuff, it starts off like this. Got a little rectangle that bumps out here. And I don't know if these line up, so I'm not going to make them line up. This here is kind of the tricky line. I do not want this line to be parallel to my line on the axis, because if you look at that drawing, there's a slight taper down. So I'm going to put a taper down, and I might even exaggerate it a little bit. Then this line comes up, goes over, and I can see that it comes up at a 90 degrees here. And just for the heck of it, I'm going to leave it out a little bit just to show you what we can do. I'm going to close the profile here. Now I have a completed profile that looks vaguely like what my drawing looks like. I'm going to drag this dimension down out of the way a little bit, just so we can work up here. Let me zoom in a little bit. So, looking at this thing, I can look across here and say, well, I know this line should be perpendicular with this line. So I'm going to use my constraints to make that happen. So, perpendicular constraint. I want to make this line perpendicular to this line. Boom, straightens it right out. I like that. Everything else looks pretty good, so I'm going to be done with the constraints. Now I'm going to start putting some dimensions on this thing. So I'm going to go up to my constrain tab, and I am going to select my dimension. Okay, we have selected our dimension button. We need to start putting some dimensions on here. So I'm going to start putting some of these horizontal dimensions on here. And if I look at my drawing again on page 4 of activity 5.5a, I'm going to just start across here. I'm going to say, well, I can look at my dimensions and see that this dimension should be 0.07. I can look across here and see that this dimension should be 0.05. I can see that the dimension from this front edge all the way over to, and I'm looking at a 0.25 dimension and then a 0.19 dimension to here. So geez, I could do some math, or I could just write in 0.25 plus 0.19. Enter. That makes it the size I need. This is decided by this overall dimension. So this is all the dimensions I need in the horizontal. So now let's look in the vertical. In the vertical dimension, I can see that the distance between this edge and this point down here should be 0.01. So I'm going to grab this line, bring it out, and make it 0.01. As you see, that changed my taper here to go the opposite direction, but that's okay because I can see that from this top line here to this point right here, that should be a 0 dimension. So if I make that 0, 0, enter, my taper moves back up the way I was hoping for it to be. I like that. So now here's sort of the, special part here, I guess, the tricky part. I can see that I have lots of diameter dimensions on my paper. So in order to get those diameters, I'm going to use this center line here. So let me click from this center line up to, say, this big tall thing. If I grab that, you see how diameter comes up on my dimension? That is a diameter of, and it should be 0.40. Enter. That knocks it way down. That's okay because my next dimension is going to be from that center line to this line right here. Right now it's bigger than the 0.40, but I can see on my paper that it should be 0.30. Oop, that makes everything more in proportion. And I believe the last dimension I'm going to need for this is this center line to this back line right here. That appears like that should be 0.29. Now I should look at my drawing and I should look at what I've modeled so far and see that it looks pretty good. All that's missing is that interior stuff. Again, that interior stuff I am going to create with holes. So I am going to be done with this sketch. Finish sketch. There it is right there. Clearly we've already talked about we are going to revolve this axle. Revolve. It automatically knew what profile I needed because I only have one profile. It automatically knew my axis because I only have one axis. That's good. I like it. Okay. So now I'm going to look at that part. That looks about what's on the paper. So now what I need to do is put a counter bore in this end and then a counter bore in the other end. So I'll start on this end since it's aimed toward me. I'll go and select the hole feature. Hole feature comes up with this. Well, I want this hole on this end and I want it to share the same center with this circular edge. So I'm going to have a concentric hole. I need to select which plane it's going to be on. It's going to be on this plane. Now that doesn't center it on the hole, but look at what I'm waiting for. I'm waiting for a concentric reference. So I'm going to have to come over here and choose this circle that I want to share the hole with. That looks pretty good. And while I'm doing this, I'm going to change my view. I'm going to view from the front so I can look at this and I can say, does that look like the hole that I have in here? First thing I notice that there's no different sizes. So I want a counter bore. I want a bigger hole on this outside and then a smaller hole in here. So I'm going to come in my middle command here, drilled hole, counter bore, counter bored hole. Now I'm going to have to put some dimensions in there. So I can see on the left hand side of my drawing the diameter of my large drill hole should be 0.25. And that should go down into the part 0.25. The diameter of the larger hole, the deeper hole I should say, is 0.19. And you can see, oh, it's taking shape now. This is kind of the shape I'm looking for. Only I want the hole to end. So whereas I have the termination as through all, I want to change that to a distance. Now the distance is kind of tricky. It's a 0.25 and a 0.19. So that's okay. I can put it right in this box here. 0.25 plus 0.19. That looks like what I need except for this thing. It's got a point on the bottom of it. This is a drilled hole with a pointed edge. I want a counterbored hole, which is a flat hole. There it is. Check to see if that's what you're looking for. Looks good to me. I'm going to hit apply. Now just as a quick, I'm going to look at it. That looks good. Let's go to the back of this part. I need a counterbored hole in here, and here's my whole box still up waiting. And the convenient thing about this, it's still waiting for a concentric hole. So concentric hole back here. I pick the plane. Now pick the concentric reference. It's going to be this. Now I'm going to turn it so I can see it and compare it what I have here. Ooh, that looks kind of good. Let's check our sizes. So my counterbore should be 0.25. That's what the last one was. The depth of my top counterbore should actually only be 0.05. Looking at the upper right hand corner of my drawing. Uh-oh, I left an extra decimal in there. That's okay, it warned me. I'm going to take one of those decimals out of there with a delete. Now the depth of this entire hole should be that 0.05 plus the 0.33. That looks about right. And then the diameter of my small hole is still 0.19. That's good. Flat bottom hole. Looks like that's what I need. Looks like it's what's in the picture, so I'm going to hit apply. I will close out my hole command because I think I'm set. Let me look at each of these holes. That looks like what my picture's looking for. This looks like what my picture's looking for, so far so good. That leaves my last thing that I need to do. We can see on page 4 again, in the isometric drawing at the top of the page, there is a slot that goes into this part right here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select a sketch plane to draw a rectangle to cut through here. And I could do that from the top, I could do that from the front. I think the way I want to do it is through the front. So I'm going to select this as my sketch plane, and I'm going to draw a rectangle right here that I can extrude into that part. So let me go choose a rectangle. Only a 2-point rectangle doesn't really work out for me because I really don't know where I want to start. So let's look at our other different types. I could use a 3-point rectangle. Oh, this is nice. The 2-point center. If I do that, I can go right to the center of this concentric circle, and I can drag this out. And looking at my picture, I see that short side of that rectangle should be 0.04. I'm just going to type that in. Hit my enter button. The height of this rectangle doesn't matter because all I'm doing is cutting this area and this area. So I'm going to finish the sketch. There's what I have. I'm going to extrude this rectangle. I want to select the profile I want to extrude. I definitely don't want to add material. I want to subtract material. And 1 inch takes me through the entire part, so I'm going to have to set a distance. My isometric drawing has the dimension on there. It is 0.20. Hit OK. That looks pretty good. The slot down through part. The last thing I need to do here is change the material. This is some type of plastic, so I'll look down. It's kind of tough. I'm going to pick this PET plastic. No, I think that, no, I'm sorry, not PET plastic. Let's go down the list a little bit. How about this PVC? See what it looks like. That looks about the color of our Automoblox stuff. So that is going to do it. From that, I am going to save my model. I'm in the Automoblox folder. I'm going to save this as Axle with my initials. I don't need to put the extension on it. It'll automatically do that, and I'm going to hit save. I'm not going to save mine because I already have one saved and no need to overwrite. So that is how we create the axle.